What's up, family? This is Big J, the Travel G, out here in Ghana, West Africa. And I just want to introduce y'all to a brother who's a pioneer, who's been here quite some time. He was here, actually, when I was here in 1999. So this brother has been here. He's seen quite a bit. He's seen a lot of changes come about in Ghana. And to be quite frank, brothers like this brother, another brother that we're going to interview, and myself, see, we were here when being here wasn't popular. So I'm going to let him pretty much talk to you and give you his insight on Ghana, his living here, and what's it like. Without any further ado, this is Brother Avikai.
Yes, greetings to all.
Greetings.
Greetings.
So yeah, brother, give us some background. Let us know where you're from and what brought you to Ghana.
All right, well, I was born in New York, in Harlem, New York, and was born and actually raised in New York. We ended up in Long Island when I was in junior high school, and so spent the rest of my teenage and high school years in Long Island. Spent some time in California, Southern California, and then spent some time before I came here in Chicago, about 13 years in Chicago. So that was in the 80s, 84 to 97.
Okay.
So in 1996 is when I first came to Ghana as a result of a whole lot of events which actually shaped my consciousness and pointed my mind toward. And when Africa talked, it was something that I don't even know how to say it. And it's a long story, so I'm trying to keep it short. And maybe other times we can go into it. But it began in the U.S. and it began in Chicago. The awakening of coming to Ghana and becoming more Pan-African, coming to Africa.
Okay. Let's just say, okay, you came here. What was it like being a young brother at that time and setting foot on the motherland? What was your first what was your first feelings and your first thoughts when you first came here?
Well, it definitely was different. I was a person that traveled a lot. Even our family, we traveled all over the U.S. all the time in the 60s and 70s. And then in the 80s and 90s, I did a lot of traveling. I worked for the airlines in Chicago, and I did a lot of traveling to a lot of international spots. And my way of travel would usually be I hit the place for a few days and then come back to the U.S. I'm home, home
Right.
to the U.S. So Africa was my first trip to Africa was Ghana, and that was in 1996. As a result of our connections to some Hebrew Israelite camps, we decided to come and investigate, buying some land. So when I first contacted the person that we were going to stay with, they asked, well, how long are you going to stay? I said, I'm going to stay 2-3 days. They said 2-3 days? No, man, you need at least 2 weeks. At least 2 weeks. So I redid my schedule. Me and my sister came. So the moment I touched down 2 weeks, Ghana. So the moment I got out into the airport and outside of the airport, I felt a connection to the land, and just to the place, like I never felt before. Nowhere had I been where this felt like, okay, this is home. And it was overwhelming. So my stay was 2 weeks. So 1 week into it, it's like, man, I gotta go back. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah,
and of course, that was the honeymoon stage of being on the motherland, feeling the connection, and visiting. And I then decided while I was here, I'll be back to come to live. Almost exactly a year to the date, I ended up back here in Ghana. And what I went through to come back, the obstacles and the experience made me realize, man, this is a big thing I'm doing, because every spiritual thing is coming against me to try to block me from or stop me from coming.
Yeah.
Which I overcame, of course.
Wow.
And I ended up back here. And that was the journey of living here, which is a total different journey.
Yes, yes.
Then-
Okay. My brother, then that you did live here for about 10 years. What exactly was the experience living here for 10 years? What were your challenges? Were there any challenges for staying here that 10-year period?
Well, that's a question that could be answered, and it would take a long time to give you everything that you're asking for.
Well, let's just let's be as brief as we can.
So the only thing I can say is that it was brutal and traumatic.
Really?
Those 10 years. I can sum it up in those 2 words.
Mm-hmm.
When I returned to the U.S., the experience that I went through, I hadn't even been able to process it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So meeting my family members, my father, my sisters, other people who knew where I had been, I could not even begin. I didn't even know where to start. So it took me probably at least 4 or 5 years before it had all been processed, and I could actually start talking to people and giving them some idea of what I went through and be able to present it in a way that was understandable.
Okay, and that was after you were here for the 10 years.
Right. And went back to the U.S. and was there 3, 4, 5 years before I could really start explaining to people what it was like.
Okay.
That's how concentrated the experience was.
Okay. Okay, well, let's see. Then I know you went through it quite a bit being here for those 10 years. I know it was quite challenging. It's also quite challenging now. So what was different then that's different now? What was the difference then and now of being in Ghana?
Well, there's been a lot of progress in many areas. One being the consciousness of the people, where the people are right now, where the youth is. Part of, and what I would say is, when I'm talking about Ghanaians understanding their Africanness and accepting it, and not trying as hard to be like the West, or to perm their hair, and to not wear, and to shave and scrape everything off their face, and women wearing their natural hair now. The music has progressed, because when I came, Ghana was coming out of military rule for many, many years. So they were curfews. So me being a musician, I'm telling you from the perspective of a musician. So when I came, there were a couple of musicians that had come back from that, and they've been back for a few years, but they were still struggling. So jazz musicians in particular, and jazz soul musicians, they were very few of them. So the ones I knew were like a handful, and they had come back from other countries. So one musician in particular was in Ivory Coast, and he came back. But that's how it was. But so those arenas, technology has advanced. So the internet has made the youth, and especially, see what is going on in the rest of the world, and they're of course attracted to what we in the States do, because we're an extension of them anyway. So that's what I've noticed at the last few years since I've been coming back. An example about technology, and I was staying with a brother, and the one that you'll meet later. I was staying in the house that he was renting with him, and telephones at that time in the U.S., cell phones had just come out, and cell phones were big, cumbersome, and they were condensing them smaller, but it was new technology. But here, forget cell phones, just regular phones. Most people did not even have a phone in the house.
I remember.
So where we were staying, in the house we were staying, there was a guest house down the road. So that's where we would get our phone calls from, international phone calls. We would give people that number, and the sister that was working there, the receptionist, she was good friends with Shabazz. And so when we would get a phone call, she would tell the person, call back in 10 minutes time. She'd hang out and run
I remember that.
down to the house and tell her whether it was me or Shabazz had called. And whatever we were doing, it was like you had to drop it right then and put on some shoes and skate down there and sit down. You're sitting down there anticipating, waiting for that call. The call comes, ding, 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 ding. She answers the phone, gives you the phone, and then you say, hello, and you hear, hello, hello, hello. How are you? How are you? And so that exchange took longer, and sometimes in the excitement, you overtalk the echo, and so it gives you an idea of what that was like. And to call internationally or anywhere almost, you had to go. They had places where you could go and call. If it was an international call, you would have to wait, and they'd have to. It was like a difficult process to get an international call, to do an international call.
Yeah.
And then so that gives you some idea. Just there's so much to say about everything I've said so far, and I can't cover anything like that. And it's a how can I say, a really intense subject.
Hey, well, thanks for that. And I also can say, I remember those days. And yeah, there wasn't no cell phones, wasn't none of that kind of stuff. They had call centers, and that's another story for another time. But I do want to ask my brother, advice would he give to anyone trying to come at this time to Ghana? What is there anything they should look out for, anticipate? What advice would you give?
Well, hard to say in a short time, but one of the most important is plan well, research well, make connections, and of course, be spiritually connected. That's very important because you also have to know how to spiritually fortify yourself because it's a very spiritual land.
Yeah.
And so you have to know the difference between good and evil, and know how to protect yourself against those things that could come against you spiritually. Spiritually, that's very important, extremely important. And of course, don't rush into anything because, and be prepared to experience things, and don't think that everything's going to go smoothly necessarily. Because even when you have good, solid connections with people that are, how can I say, honest and transparent and have integrity, you have so many other things that, so many other factors in the land that could still give you problems.
Okay.
So be prepared to suffer some kind of loss, So prepare for that, and that's and take your time and try to make. I shouldn't say try to make, but make. How can I say? Connect people resources is very important, and even with people resources, don't rush into anything.
Okay. All right, my brother. Well, thank you so much, man, for giving us your wisdom and your insight. And we look forward to talking to you again very soon.
All right.
So just want to say much love to you and your family.
Thank you.